Okay. Uh, let's have a look. Pearl says, I really like the rules formula for the away from values in this module. Can this be, in your experience, can it even replace therapy or healing inner child wounds or self-sabotaging things? Uh, this is a great question, because what it essentially brings up is the concept of how we approach what we perceive to be our past. It taps into what I was saying earlier. You could feel cleansed 1,000 different ways. What you've done is used the experience of what you perceive to be a ceremony to allow you to give yourself permission to feel something you could have felt without that. It's the smoke and mirrors around how you think that the magic has to happen. Now, I'm not saying there's certain times where therapy is not useful as a guide, and with a good practitioner, people can be led through a maze of indecision, or they can be led to awarenesses that they wouldn't have been guided to on their own. That's very useful if you're working with a good therapist. But when it comes to the away from values, remember, we've got an eternal now. And most people go to therapy because they don't like things that keep coming up in their now. So if you make it hard to experience the things in your now that are no longer theirs, which means you're no longer experiencing them, why can that replace therapy? Of course it can. Right? Don't complicate it. Now, it may not make therapists be able to, get rich and pay their mortgage, but that's not, the aspect of what we're doing here. What you're saying is that if we can set the game up so that we constantly feel more emotions that we want to feel and less emotions we don't want to feel, why would you need therapy? Because ultimately, isn't that why you're going? I need to clean up my past. No, you need to clean up your now, which you keep infesting with memories that you create, so that you keep screwing up your now with things that you project from a previous story. Stop doing it. Well, I can't. Well, the reason you can't is because you've so trained your brain to do it. You're unconsciously competent at it. So when you're 95% of the time on autopilot, the brain goes to what it's familiar with, which is telling the story about your past. Because you've got rules and values that then give you feedback that say this is normal. If you can retrain your brain through your rules and values, so now you've got new ways of looking at things, less triggers for the old, easier triggers for the new, for the things you want, your brain is going to be retrained, rewired through neuroplasticity to start to default to that when you're sleeping awake. Everybody follow? That's ultimately where we're going here. And if you build that muscle, you're able to use that muscle at times where most people are on the wrong default setting, like walking into prison, smiling and excited about what's going to happen. Not because you're crazy, but because your brain will not let you become upset, depressed, or anxious. The wiring's not there. Those footsteps in the snow have been blown over, and there's a different highway that leads to a different place that the car goes down a lot easier. Let's talk about this in terms of brainwaves. We've got another 5-day challenge coming up, a couple of weeks. All excited about it. But ultimately, when we talk about manifesting, we talk about living in through me. I'll give you a little masterclass. Must be all the ceremonies I've done today. I'm feeling in flow. Yeah. So if you can create far more from an alpha state, where alpha is bridging the gap from by me to through me. Now, in other words, if you're in a beta brainwave state, anything from 20 12, 14 hertz upwards. The more or the higher your brain waves, the more associated you are to physical matter reality. It's a biological response based upon fear and present danger. Meaning that if I'm scared, fear is simply an evolutionary warning sign to point you towards physical danger. That's what its role plays. It doesn't play any other role. It's to get your attention, stop you sleeping awake, to show you that there's a snake in the tree or a tiger at the cave or a bandit in the village. So fear, or there's a sharp drop next to you on the edge of the cliff. So fear is designed to get your attention and point it towards a threat that you can then consciously deal with. And for that, you need to be fully present in physical matter reality, not meditating or daydreaming, correct? So therefore, once you start getting scared or stressed is the achiever word for fear, remember, you get stressed, your evolutionary response means you're now more physical matter reality, yet more human, less being. Remember, human beings, perfect encapsulation of physical, non-physical in one. Human means you're associated to the body and the outer world centric. Being means you're associated to consciousness and inner world centric. So if you're focused on being more human, i.e. physical, dealing with the outer world, whenever you're stressed, you cut your connection to consciousness and the divine, and you focus more on the what's happening outside to deal with it. It's just an evolutionary response. You become more particle, less wave. In other words, you cut your connection. You can't meditate when you're scared. Get the idea? If you're able to drop your brain waves into an alpha state, alpha is where you're inner world centric. You're contemplating. You're aware of the alpha, you're aware of the outer world, but it's not primary. Reading a book is a great example I often give. When you're reading a book, you're obviously in alpha because you are creating everything in your mind. Nobody else can see the characters, hear their voices, or however the author's guiding you through. Everybody in the physical world sees you staring at black and white symbols on a page. And somebody can call your name and you can't even hear them because you're so engrossed. You still have to be in the outer world because you're reading the symbols. But your primary centricity is inner world. That's the alpha state. If you were to close the book at that point, but maintain your inner world centricity, you'd be in an alpha state of consciousness. Alpha state, you need to be relaxed. The reason you need to be relaxed is because if you're unrelaxed, where do you go? You go back up to beta because there's danger. That's why people get their best ideas and creativity in the shower, because you relax when you step into hot water. And all of a sudden, and now your brain waves drop and you start getting downloads, information from the field that you can't hear when you're in beta. This is why I say, what's the answer to all of your questions? Tune in. How do you tune in? You have a better signal to noise ratio. What is noise? Noise is the mind, which is the front part of the brain, is beta. Alpha is more the heart, where the heart is leading the brain waves, not the brain leading the heart waves. Is this making sense? So you can get creative around that. Now, when you start to realize that your job is to recondition your operating system of your brain to default more to alpha than it is to beta. You'll hear me say this on the manifestation challenges. Beta brain waves is also known as the slave wave or the poverty wave. Because when you're in beta, you can only go out and hustle. In other words, you only have access to buy me and to me. If you want access to through me, you've got to learn how to recondition your brain's operating system to access alpha at an easier level. Drop cortisol out of the body and walk around in less of a state of stress. How do you do that? By having the universe as your friend, not your enemy. By having a belief system and a set of rules and values that sets you up to win in this game of life, rather than sets you up as a victim in the battleground of life. Start to see it tying in, guys. So if you can consistently retrain your brain to the point where when you are sleeping awake, it's your friend and you're on the right track, rather than having to remember consciously. And this is what I mean about when I went to prison and I got excited, or when I'm on the ocean and it's, this physical threat to life and it's massively exhausting. My default mindset is, how can I be grateful? How can I make this fun? How can I, surrender to the things I can't control? How can I remember that I'm doing this to try to inspire people, rather than focus on the physical pain, focus on the present danger, focus on all of the stuff that I couldn't control that was like, incessant. It was easier because my brain already had all of those paths conditioned before that. So it was easier to drive the car down those roads rather than the fear roads that I hadn't walked down, at all, and were kind of, not accessible or as accessible. Everybody's starting to understand. So your new rules and values are essentially designed, initially consciously, to override past programming, so that, you're not going to get it right out of the gate. But the more you practice, the more you become aware over time, over the next 3, 6, 12 months. And you get a framework at the end of EMF on how to make this last longer. You will, over the next several months, you are just conditioning your mind into setting you up to win in a way where your new default state is more alpha, less beta, more through me, less by me, more in flow, less resistance. That's where we're heading. Now, for some of you, you need to apply that around your money consciousness. More abundance, less scarcity. Some of you understand it intellectually, but you're not practicing it. What do you think the oath of abundance was for? Oh, if I stand in front of the mirror and I shout my oath of abundance, I'm going to get money. It's not the game. The game is to condition over 30 days or more with emotion, new pathways in your neural connections and brain, so that you can start to automatically expect money from unexpected places, unexpected people, unexpected opportunities, unexpected. In other words, right? You take the pressure off where it has to come from. So now if I need money, I'm not worried about where it's coming from. Because if I'm worried about where it's coming from, what brainwave am I in? Which means now I have to figure it out myself. I don't have any access to my chief how officer. But if I'm conditioned that much and I have such a more abundant relationship to money, I start to really embody and understand. My business isn't my source of money. My clients aren't my source of money. My job is not my source of money. I am my source of money. And when that's congruent, the game changes, because I'm now generating money, attracting money, creating money through opportunities and commerce and people and all that kind of stuff. But I'm not out there chasing it, trying to make it so that I can feel less scarce. It doesn't happen overnight. I get it. But now you can see why EMF isn't a weekend seminar. Right? It's work in progress. But just be mindful of keeping your eye on the prize, and don't beat yourself up if you don't think you have it yet. You are the prize. Some of you needy people in relationships need to remember that as well. Yeah. You are the prize. That brings in self-acceptance, self-appreciation, and how you value this amazing, game called life. Remember, you don't live in a friendly universe. You don't live in a hostile universe. You live in a self-reflecting universe. That's its job. The mirror loves you. But if you stand in front of it, right, wearing scruffy clothes, its only job is to reflect back. that you look like crap. Your job is to stand in front of the mirror of life and smile. And the mirror at that point has only one job: to smile back. And your predominant state that you look in the mirror with is the one that you're conditioned to with your model of psychology that makes the 95% of the time you're walking around sleeping awake on autopilot your predominant reflection. You can put yourself in a great state in the moment, but wouldn't it be great if your brain put you in the state 95% of the time when you weren't thinking about it? Yeah, that's where we want to head. Rather than the 5% of the time just because you went back and read your notes.